Happy World Radio Day, everyone. And thank you to Julian for inviting me here to speak. So as you know, I don't speak any Spanish, so I will not be insulted if you start to get a bit bored halfway through, because that's not easy. So I'm just going to talk to you about how the work we've done over the last few years to convince more advertisers in the UK to invest in advertising. So I'm going to roughly take you through kind of how we talk about radio listening in the UK to advertisers and agencies. I'm going to talk about revenues, which have just been announced this morning in the UK, and the audio revolution. I've heard it mentioned here, I think. What is it, and how do we talk about it? How do we challenge perceptions? How do we challenge how people view our medium? And the threats and opportunities that are kind of around the corner at the moment and for the future. So firstly, this is penetration of UK radio. Roughly 90% of the UK population tune into radio, but we have a very strong state radio that doesn't carry advertising, but we are roughly over 50% of listening compared to the BBC. And actually, 3/4 of radio listeners are commercial radio listeners, and they listen, on average, for around 14 hours every week. And I don't know if you've seen this chart this morning, but we cannot talk about trust enough in our medium. This is the EU barometer that is done every year, where they measure trust in media. And every single year, for the last 12 years, radio has come out top as the most trusted medium. Now, even the Netherlands, Holland, went over this year from press, so we really do have almost blue. There are a few countries left to go. Notice where some of them are, and you might understand why trust is low. This is the current share of media time in the UK, according to the IPA Touchpoints tool. So you'll see that radio and audio is roughly the same size, or a little bit more, than social media and other online browsing. So it's pretty big. It's pretty big, and I'm going to explain about why it's so big in a minute. But this is today's news in the UK, which is to show that we have had our biggest revenues ever. We've grown again this year to 740 million. It's pretty big, but also, on top of that, we had quite a lot of factors that made this very hard to get to this figure, which is one, our government almost dropped their spend completely after propping us up all the way through the pandemic. But also we had the war in Ukraine, and lots of brands pulled their advertising because they were uncertain about what that was going to happen. We've had the cost of living crisis, and our Queen died, which meant that advertising had to be pulled for quite a significant period of time in September while the country was in national mourning. But we still have our biggest year ever. Now, the audio revolution, what is it? So this is audio listening over the last few years. This is Radar Midas data that is measured a couple of times a year. So this is showing the growth of online streaming. So this is your Spotify services. And you can see that there has been a massive fight going on between owned music and streamed music. The top line there is audiobooks, I think, which is growing a bit, but the main fight is going on between owned music and streamed music. We are much more comfortable not to own music anymore. It's sad, but we don't have our own CD collections, and Apple iTunes is a distant memory. So that is what's been happening there, big fight going on between there. But what happens when I put radio back into this listening? Absolutely nothing. Radio still dominates listening. In the UK, this always surprises agencies when I show this chart. They're convinced that streaming services have taken our cake. The audio revolution is largely down to technology, the way we listen. Radios are no longer a thing in the corner of the room. You can take radio with you everywhere you go, whether you're listening in car, so important in-car listening. I don't know if anyone from Radio Player is here today, but keep up the good work of keeping radio in cars. It's so important. You can listen to it, of course, through IP streaming, through your phone, and through smart speakers. Now, smart speakers have been really significant in the UK. It accounts for 73% of all audio entertainment on things. So actually, what we say is that Alexa is really just a smart radio in the corner of your room. She can do lots of other stuff, but really, we're all quite lazy, and we just ask her to play the radio. So this one is the challenges. Does anyone here know what this is? You will recognize it. It's an advertising agency in any country in the world. This is kind of what they look like. They don't listen to radio as a rule. Some of them do, a few of them do more now. They might listen to some sport and stuff like that, but they claim not really listen to radio, listen to podcasts, stream a lot. They actually listen to more radio than they think. But getting through to this audience is always quite a challenge which I've really loved heading up. So this is the current commercial audio split. So this is, because one of the things agencies do is they mix up total listening on Spotify with commercial listening. They don't think of them as separate. So actually, this is the current split. Commercial radio has 78% of commercial audio listening. This really hasn't changed over the last few years, as I keep saying. But there is the split with streaming services and podcasts in the UK. But we did some research, which I'm going to talk about a few times this morning, called Reevaluating Media. And Ubiquity did it, and they interviewed lots of decision makers from both the client side and the agency side. And they asked them what they thought the commercial audio was split. So this is really senior people in agencies, by the way, really senior people who need to know. That is what they put the figure at when they were asked. They thought radio was much lower, and actually they massively over-indexed on streaming services and podcasts. So the other thing is that people don't think radio is really digital. So it's not really a digital medium. That's why it's old-fashioned, because I can't do all the clever stuff I can do on Instagram and Snap. Well, actually, this is total radio listening through IP in the UK, and as you'll see, it's from pre-COVID to above. We're now heading towards the 25%. This is growing at a substantially faster rate than we thought it was. And in the UK, we're doing quite a lot to work with the government to ensure that radio remains free to carry on things like the Alexa smart speaker, because we don't necessarily trust the digital gatekeepers that they won't start trying to control our services and run their own ads within our content. And this is the reason why we're so concerned. So we've only been measuring this since the beginning of last year, but that blue there is the amount of smart speaker listening going through IP, and it's growing at double the rate than we first predicted it would. And actually, just talking of those revenues, the revenues on digital advertising, given it's around 24%, I think, of total revenues, it's actually grown by 50% over the last few years. So it's hugely valuable to radio stations and to clients who value stations sharing their first-party data. So this is a made-up quote, but one that I get a lot, which is, isn't it just old people listening to the radio? So we do some analysis every year, and this is actually the current trend. So the top line there is radio. It's pretty big. You'll see that during the pandemic, there was a bit of an increase there in free Spotify and stuff like that. And podcasts have kind of not really, there was a little bit of, but it's not really grown that substantially. We've lost around 4% of our audience, but who hasn't? I mean, I would argue that TV and newspapers have lost far bigger, younger audiences. We still have a huge audience, and this is a similar size to our biggest national network audiences in terms of the 15 to 24-year-olds. So, you know, we have to keep young people listening, but they're not listening, if you know what I mean. Okay, so this is proof of radio advertising. One of the things is that a few years ago, there was just so much money that radio could take, but we couldn't prove the return on investment. So we appointed an agency called Holmes & Cook. Oh no, sorry, actually this is sorry, because it's in Spanish, I knew this would happen. This is about targeting. So the perception of that re-evaluating media research is we asked those top media decision makers what they thought were the top mediums to target people. And then Ubiquity, who did the research, trawled through all the available public information and public research on effectiveness and targeting. And they discovered that actually radio came out top as the best place to target people. Now, targeting doesn't always mean direct targeting one individual through social media. We need to get people to think about more sophisticated planning when they talk about radio, because this was pretty shocking that we were actually quite far down the list, yet all of our publicly available, and by the way, Radio Centre has, I would argue, the most publicly available effectiveness data in the world, and yet people still put us down. So this was something we have to work with. But actually, one of the things that we've discovered about targeting through radio is that, you know, radio companies, we've established there's about 9 or 10 listening moments. So this means whether you're in your car, whether you're on your way to work, commuting, doing the cleaning, the ironing, cooking. And radio companies, 9 out of 10 of these listening moments. And we discovered that if you hear an ad whilst doing something that's relevant to that task, engagement goes up by 23%, and actually the brand goes into your memory by 22%. So that means if you're cooking and you hear an ad for, say, an olive oil brand, you're more likely to remember that brand and remember it in the future when you next do your shop. So that was our here and now research that we did. We followed this up in 2020 with what happens if you hear ads for FMCG, so fast-moving consumer goods, household products and stuff, on the way to the supermarket. You know, lots of people listen to radio in the car, and this actually showed that if you'd hear radio ads, your intent to purchase goes up by 33%. And actually, you notice brands a lot more as well. So if you've heard an ad for a relevant product, you're more likely to see it on the shelf once you get inside that retailer. Now, this one, I think, is the one I was thinking of. Yes, so this was we realized that there was a lot of money missing from radio. This was all about unlocking the missing millions that radio deserved. It was our biggest ever research project. It is available on our website. And I have to tell you, it happened luckily just before I joined, because it took years to get out. But we worked with a company called Holmes & Cook, and they worked with all the big media agencies across, I think it was over 2,000 media campaigns for over 500 advertising campaigns, where they were given access to the ROI of every campaign. And from that, we were able to give an average figure that you had on return for your investment. So we discovered from that we were only second to television in terms of return on investment in media. And actually and I know I've seen similar studies from around the world, it always comes back roughly the same. So I've seen one that says for every euro you spend, you get around €6.70 back in ROI. And I don't believe it would be any different in this market if you haven't already done it. So the other thing that we do in the UK is people say, I don't know if my campaign's working. if I measure it, I measure it under different things than you might measure it. So we launched a free measurement service in the UK called Radio Gauge. We've measured over 1,000 campaigns now where we benchmark you against competitors, and we measure the creative effectiveness of your campaign, and we advise people what they can do better for the next one. And we've gone on to build tools based on this and have more in-depth research on it. Again, it's all on our website. But Radio Gauge is used by most, I think we've measured all of the top 100 advertisers now in the UK. So speaking of our tools, we do have Radio Gauge. We have a campaign ROI calculator where you can put in your amount of money you're going to spend across your brand on different media, and we will work out what your return on investment will be. Sorry, there are more tools, but I couldn't fit it on the slide. We have planning optimizer tools for the planners and agencies, cover curve tools. We have inspirational ads for people to go and listen to. And we also have the brand music navigator, which is if you're thinking of using music in your advertising, will give you an idea of what will work with your brand on there. That's based on some other research we did. So is everyone still with me? Are you okay? Though I'm not speaking Spanish, you're still here with me? Okay. So this one here is lifestyle photography. This is available for any of you in the room. We have made this free. So one of the things that keeps happening, and I know this slide's a bit funny, so bear with me, is this is the image that people love to show for radio. Like, they love showing old-fashioned radios. These are really, really positive stories about our medium, but they kept using really weird photos. And one of the things I will say, and I've seen it here this morning and what I've seen so far, is that people also love to show radio listening with people with headphones on going. Now, I don't think anybody listens to the radio like that. So I thought, why not get some lifestyle photographs done showing contemporary modern listening of radio and flood the market with them, give them to anybody who wants them. So these were these stories reimagined with our lifestyle photos. Please help yourself to them. They're available for anybody. But this was my personal favourite, this was my then CEO, a very respectable woman who wrote about trust in news on radio and all the great work that radio stations did. This is a national newspaper, and they chose to use this photograph of, I don't even think it's like transmitters, but two puppy dogs from the 1930s. Awful picture. So, we phoned them up and said, look, we've got a better photo. And they used one of our lifestyle images, and doesn't that look better for radio? So, future opportunities. Why is radio in a bit of a tricky situation? So this keeps me awake at night. This is some ubiquity research that was done on behalf of the World Federation of Advertisers. And they asked them, are you planning to decrease your spend in this cost of living crisis? And then everyone keeps talking about going into recession. We're not quite in a recession yet in the UK, but we are definitely heading for some choppy times. And I couldn't believe it when I saw radio. They said they were planning to significantly decrease spend across EMEA on radio. And I just couldn't understand why. Why? We have enormous audiences. We're free. We keep people company. We have lots of reasons. But the thing, so I thought, well, we need to do something about that. So this morning in the UK, we have launched this, which is a new report based on all of our research, which shows advertisers that radio is a friend, not just to listeners, but to them in this cost of living crisis. So it's a comprehensive thing, and if you can read English, it's available to download on our website from now. And it features lots of the reasons why you should continue to invest in not just advertising, but particularly in radio advertising, to show the worthiness of it. But again, going back to this ubiquity research, we did some research like which is the medium that's best to help brands in tough times. And radio came out second, again, only to TV. Radio is a really great medium. It's got huge reach, it's got brilliant audiences, and people should be investing more in it in this time, not cutting their spend. So this was our latest big research that we did that came out in 2022. So again, going back to those people in advertising agencies, they're always talking about Spotify and commercial audio. So we thought, well, why don't we just ride in on this audio revolution? Let's talk about something called generation audio. This is the way people listen. So we wanted to explore the growth and why commercial audio was growing. And actually, we identified 7 need states to why people listen. So some of them had already been established back when we did some similar research back in 2014. But this new one, keeps me company, this came in really, really strongly, and it had never existed before. The world has changed post-pandemic, and people really value the company that radio gives. And actually, if you look at all 7 need states, radio comes top in 6 out of 7. So this will be why radio will continue to be successful and call in those audiences, because it meets every single one of these need states, apart from broaden my horizons, which went to podcasts. So that kind of makes sense, I think. I think if you really want to get in depth on something and broaden your horizons, there is podcasts for you. But even lift my mood, helps me escape, that all came through really strongly for radio. So this is another one of our lifestyle pictures, but also the working from home, which I've just mentioned. This is a huge opportunity for radio listening. So we asked people, I said we were coming out of the pandemic, who'd all been working from home. This is professional people who have a lot of money, a lot of either high ownership, high home ownership, high wages. And we asked them, are you planning on continuing to work from home? And the answer was a resounding yes. We will be seeking to continue to work from home multiple times a week. I think I was in that never area after being stuck with my children for the best part of 2 years at home, but I have actually come round, and I do work from home a couple of days for a week. But we have a mishmash of people in our office, some who work permanently from home, and that's the same in amongst our clients. So this really resonates with people in advertising, because they think, oh yeah, I work from home too, yeah. And 56% of the working from home audiences are commercial radio listeners. And they listen for a number of reasons. So for all of those need states coming through again, theirs keeps me company. But actually, this bottom one as well is really important. You can't have the TV on while you're working, and you really shouldn't be scrolling through your social media. But it's okay to have the radio on, because I can play it in the background, and I can get on with my work. It's the ultimate multitasking medium. And this is an audience that have said that they're really receptive to advertising. If they see something, if they hear something advertised on the radio, 52% of them said they'll go online and look it up. So it shows the connection between radio and online advertising really nicely. But I would argue that this true figure is higher, because people do not like to admit that they are influenced by advertising. So that's just me. Okay, so new opportunities, new brands coming in. This is one that we're really excited about in the UK. This is brands born online. Brands that have never really, they grew digitally, and now they are no longer being nurtured just by digital advertising, and they are seeking big broadcast traditional mediums to help them grow their brand beyond just targeted ads. And so we've actually seen, and I did this analysis on Friday afternoon with our new spend, is actually pre-pandemic. These brands have spent 59% more. We saw a significant shoot up actually in 2021, but actually we've gone up by 59% with brands born online. Direct-to-consumer brands, they're also called. For TV, this number is 3-figured. So there's still a way to go for radio. So I'm just going to finish by talking about see radio differently, which is our positioning at Radio Centre. It's a kind of call to action, and it's something. When I got to Radio Centre, I came from an advertising background, and before that, as a journalist, I thought we don't really have a call to action, a positioning for Radio Centre. It was very formal, about Britain loves radio or something like that, and so I thought, well, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I got an agency in, and they came up with this positioning for us, and we use it across all of our advertising and the work we do with governments and all of the sort of events we do as well. And this is a kind of example of some of the ads that we do. So this one here, obviously we have 38 million followers now, but we took over the London Metro system, the London Underground system, in September, around the time when the new iPhone launches, and we to mimic those tech ads that are on there. And so people who saw them thought that they were ads for some tech, but when they looked closer, they realised they were actually for radio advertising. And that is my personal favourite, unskippable, unblockable, unbeatable. We also had radio campaigns that every few seconds were interrupted by someone asking you if you would accept cookies. Now, we have seen a slow death of cookies, but the cookie advertising pop-ups are still there, but you don't get them on radio. So we launched See Radio differently by doing some songs on the radio, and we went for some famous brand marketers. We identified, I think, 6 across different sectors. So they range from Unilever to L'Oreal to Airbnb to John Lewis, which is a big retailer like Il Corte Inglés over here. And we did some special songs on the radio. And the idea is that they would be dedicated to that marketing director, that chief marketing officer, and we would wait and see how fast it started to appear on Twitter and how fast they came back to us to prove that radio can make you famous. So this was our first victim. This is a man called Keith Weed. He was the then global chief marketing officer of Unilever. He had, I think, something like an £8 billion media spend, and he spent virtually nothing on radio in the UK. Nothing. He also has a good sense of humour, we hoped. And so we created a song for him. And it happened exactly as we thought it was. Twitter really did blow up. I mean, this is just an example of some of the stuff that happened, where people were like, oh, God. And his PA, his assistant, told me that it went out that morning at 7:45, and by the time he got to the office at 8:45, people were singing the song to him when he got there. And, it had an effect. Unilever did start spending. It certainly made their agency listen. And actually, when he went on to do his keynote speaker at the Cannes Advertising Festival, he talked about the power of audio, and he talked about this campaign, which was quite a proud moment for us. So you've obviously seen Keith. You've seen, look at him, apparently he really likes jazz music and sometimes a little bit of country music. So I thought I'd kind of leave you with the actual song that we dedicated to Keith Weed.
This song is dedicated to Keith Weed, Chief Marketing Officer of Unilever. You can be the leader, Keith, we from Unilever. You can be the leader, Keith, we from Unilever. We've got something for you, it can only make you better. It's not complicado, it's called radio. You can be the leader, you're Keith from Unilever. We're not here to preach about this thing called reach. But when you need some traction, this is your call to action. You can be the leader, you're Keith from Unilever. This is our story, true told in every household. Now we say it's on your Twitter, you like all things visual. This one, prick your ears for the oral. Advertise with us, this request is formal. That's right, Keith Weed! Yo, listen up, radio is the place to be. OMG to the FMC. Why don't you be the leader? Oh, Keith from Unilever. Why don't you be the leader? So this is our request, Keith. See radio differently at radiocenter.org.
So it's a good thing that he had a sense of humour. He really liked it. And that is it for me. Thank you very much.